Pretty awesome. We flipped this around, and right now they're showing video of the different things that are available here for you to check out at Midsummer Scream. They'll be wrapping up here today at 7, but tomorrow they will be open from 11 a.m. till 7 p.m. again. And tomorrow are some of the most important presentations, in my opinion. We have the awesome Queen Mary. It's their 10-year anniversary. We have Winchester House, which is an awesome place up in Northern California. And I'm delighted that they come all the way down here. And most amazingly of all will be, of course, the closing presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Midsummer Scream. Universal Studios Hollywood Halloween Horror Nights is a Southern California tradition that draws fans to Los Angeles from all corners of the globe, simply because they want to be scared to death. This year, fans will face classic Universal monsters, celebrate holidays in hell, take another trip to the Upside Down, and witness the Ghostbusters battle sinister spirits. What else does Universal have in store for this year's Halloween Horror Nights in Hollywood? Are you ready to find out? Please welcome to the stage, Universal Studios Hollywood Halloween Horror Nights Creative Director, John Murdy.
How you doing? All right, I have some good news and I have some bad news, okay? Which do you want first? Bad news, okay. My partner in crime, Chris Williams, is unable to be with us today because he is sick. He texted me on the way over and he's like, I'm so sorry. So on behalf of Chris, he wanted me to say he's very sorry he couldn't be with all you guys today. Do you want the good news? Yeah. Roll the video.
Hey, Midsummer Scream, it's Greg Nicotero here. Very, very sad that I can't be there with you and John Murdy, but we have some very exciting news. Creepshow is coming to a streaming series produced by myself, made with lots of love and blood. I don't even think that makes sense, but it makes sense. Anyway, The Maze is coming to Halloween Horror Nights at Universal. You're gonna love it. It's gonna have elements of the original movie plus the new series. I can't wait for you guys to see it.
Creepshow is coming to Halloween Horror Nights 2019 at Universal Studios Hollywood. Give it up! How many of you guys are fans of the original film, the 1982 film? As a coincidence, so am I. I saw the film in the theater and I instantly fell in love with it. You know, Creepshow's been one of those properties that's kind of always been on my wish list that maybe one day we would do it. And then, as it turned out, last year during Halloween Horror Nights, Greg Nicotero came to the event and told us that there was going to be a new Creepshow series on Shudder. Do you guys know about this? Universal Studios by George Romero, the great George Romero. And the upcoming series opens. So you're going to get the best of both worlds. Is that okay with you? So what I'm and then I brought some other goodies to share with you as well. Maybe share some Scare Zone characters, some Scare Zone art, some of the things we're creating for Halloween Horror Nights 2019. Is that okay with you? And I should, in the spirit of full disclosure, I designed this obviously for myself and Chris to talk. So there'll be times when I click to a slide, which I, honestly have no idea what I'm talking about. So just nod and smile when we get to those parts, okay? All right, now obviously this all started with Greg Nicotero. Greg came to the event last year and brought everybody down from both the original Creepshow and also the new Shudder series. And actually that's when we started talking. That's very, very common for us. We're usually planning the event. Actually right now we're actually planning 2020 at the same time we're planning 2019. But it's very often that we meet with people during the event and we start talking about the properties that we want to do the following year. So we started talking really early about Creepshow. Obviously, you know, we have a long history with Mr. Nicotero. This is a picture of Greg and I inside a real helicopter that we created for one of our Walking Dead mazes. But I ran into Greg a lot, you know, longer than Walking Dead. Years ago, I produced a show for Universal Studios Hollywood, the old special effects stages show. I used to have a set called The Creature Factory. And I did a whole piece, a makeup piece on Greg Nicotero and his work in a movie called Day of the Dead. And that's actually when I first met Greg, so I've known him for a long time. What's great with working with someone like Greg and the talented people at K&B Effects is they know our product, they're big fans of Horror Nights. So we actually designed this maze, you know, kind of hand in hand with Greg, sitting down in our office with Chris and I. And also what's really exciting is because he did all the makeup and K&B did all the makeup for the new show, that means we get to utilize the same molds that Greg created for the TV series. So when you get to see the creatures for the new series, you're going to be seeing the exact same stuff that you saw on the television show. So let's talk about Creepshow. So when you think about a movie like this and how you want to approach it, you know, the origin of this whole movie is that it's inspired by the old EC comics, the horror comics of the 1950s that Romero grew up with. We really wanted to pay homage to that, because if you guys watch Creepshow, it's got a lot of references to comic books, right? So the facade for our attraction is actually going to be a giant Creepshow comic book. And you're going to walk into the comic book, and the comic book's going to come to life. I'll show you a couple of examples of that. So now the host for our experience, kind of the through line that's going to take us through these 5 different stories that we're dealing with, is of course the creep. This is the new creep. This is the creep that Mr. Nicotero designed for the new series. So the first section of the maze is going to be called Meet the Creep, and we're going to be kind of walking through the pages of a comic book. I'll show you just a rough design element. This is like the comic book art that you saw in the film, and our idea is that we wanted to bring that to life. So working with our designers, we were able to reach out to everybody at Shudder and not only get all of the comic book art being generated for the new TV series, but the thing I always loved about those old comic books were the kooky ads. You would find them, you know what I'm talking about? The authentic monkey's paw, only $4.98. So when you're walking through it, not only are you going to see comic book panels that are going to be setting up the 5 different stories that you're going to experience, but it's also going to be some of this, you know, these ads that you would historically find in these comic books. So this is just a rough SketchUp model that our design staff and our art department are working on. So as you're going through this first section, you're kind of walking through the pages of the Creepshow comic book, and the creep is coming to life and attacking you. And you're going to see the creep throughout this experience. As I mentioned, he's more or less the through line. But then we get to our first story. You know, so Chris and I had the, you know, right out of the gate, you know, the way Chris and I work is we have to both, you know, agree 100% or it doesn't go in the maze, and that's how we've always worked. We didn't have any arguments about what to start the Creepshow maze off with. We wanted to start it off with Father's Day. Now, how many of you guys have seen the original film, the 1982 film? Okay. And how many of you guys are going to now go out and rent or, you know, get it on, and watch it? It's one of my favorite horror movies. If you like anthology horror movies, it's fantastic. But the first story is called Father's Day, and it's about this patriarch of this very wealthy man, you know, who's kind of a tyrant, and his daughter murders him with an ashtray. And then on Father's Day every year, she goes to the family, you know, plot. He's buried right there on the property, and she goes to pay her respects to the father she killed. But on this particular Father's Day, old Nathan Grantham comes out of the ground, and he says, "It's Father's Day. I want my cake." And that's, you know, what we're going to bring to life. So what we have to bring to life is the Grantham house and the family plot. So after you get the comic book panel that sets you up for Father's Day, this is what you're walking into. So gave this to Chris. I pull all the reference from the movie, and then Chris and his art department starts drawing it. So this is just an elevation. This is from Chris's drawing package. This is the Grantham house. And, Chris and our art department, what they want to do and what we strive to do with every maze we do for Halloween Horror Nights is to try to nail every detail. So, that includes Nathan Grantham's grave, and wanted that exact gravestone. We wanted to build it exactly like the movie. We wanted to see Nathan coming out of the grave. So this is just another elevation that shows you, what Chris and his team are designing and what is being built right now. And then you go into the Grantham's house, and really, one of the things that was really important to us, and it was important to Greg, and we talked a lot with Greg about how to bring this to life in a maze, is not only is the movie inspired by a comic book, but it looks like a comic book. All of the individual segments start off as a comic book panel illustration, and then they bleed into the live action. But also, whenever something really bad happens in Creepshow, the lighting changes, and it goes red and blue, and it has those crazy kind of lightning bolt patterns. And this is something we wanted to bring to the maze. So as you're going through the Grantham house and you're being attacked by Nathan, in his, just crawled out of the grave state. Every time he attacks, we're doing this lighting trick so that we're paying homage to the film, even to the extent of doing the lightning bolt pattern. So here's another elevation I'll show you. This is, of course, the I Got My Cake scene from Father's Day. But when he comes out through that, serving door, the whole background that lights up behind him turns into that kind of red and blue lightning bolt pattern that you see in the film. So all throughout the maze, the direction we're giving our lighting designers and our lighting team is to bring it to life so that it feels like a comic book. And that's Father's Day. Story number 2, or episode number 2, The Crate. You guys remember The Crate? Okay, this is Adrienne Barbeau, Fritz Weaver, Hal Holbrook were the stars of this particular episode of the movie. And what it's about, a small college on the East Coast where a janitor just so happens to find this really old shipping crate from 1834 that's shoved under a staircase. It's probably been down there for, over 100 years. And he calls a professor and tells him, to come down here. They may have made a major discovery. But when they open up the crate, there's something really, really bad inside it. Do you guys know the name of the actual, what's the official name? This should have been my trivia question. I should have used this later. Fluffy, that's right. Fluffy the Crate Beast is the name of the creature. He's like an ape-like creature that's inside the crate. And of course, he starts eating people, and that's where the horror ensues. So the main setting for us to recreate here is the science classroom. And of course, as you can see from the screen grabs I've got on the screen, there's an awful lot of blood. And I thought it might be kind of interesting, and this was something I was going to have Chris talk about, because he knows the chemistry behind this. But how we make blood, because you think it's like, a no-brainer. Yeah, we do a horror event, there's a lot of blood. But when you're doing, did you guys see our Shining maze a couple of years ago? Yeah. Remember the elevator scene, all that blood? That's actually a special kind of blood that our guys invented. When they put it on, it looks like hot pink, and it looks horrible. So the first time I ever saw them do this, I walked into The Shining, and I was like, "My God, what have you done? It's pink!" But when it dries, it turns red, and it looks wet, and it always retains that look. So these are just, this is just blood tests. This is what we do in our copious spare time. So our prop team, which is headed up by a gentleman named Tony Lindis and a whole bunch of talented prop and set dressing artisans, they have to make a whole ton of this stuff. So they prefabricate the blood. That's why you see that blue tape on the side. They put it down so they can lift it off again, and then they can take it into the environment and then, fasten it into the scenes and attach it. But the great part of it is it always looks wet, and it stands up to heavy traffic, which we have in a maze. There's a lot of you that walk through our mazes. This is just another example of Chris's drawing package. So Chris hand draws everything. Even today, this always blows people's minds when I tell them that. We hand draw everything. So, if you're aspiring, to do this for a career, how many of you guys out there want to be in this industry or do something like this for a living? A lot of you, yeah. Learn how to draw. I know we always default to the computer these days and think that everything's designed in the computer. And of course we use the computer. It's a major tool in our design kit. But all of our set designers and illustrators, they all hand draw every single elevation. And this is just an elevation that shows the scene when you come in and meet Fluffy. Now, of course, we have to create Fluffy, but he's really small. If you've ever seen the movie, he's his feet would be where my knees are, and this would be his body. So that presented an interesting challenge for us. So Chris and our team devised a kind of clever way to do Fluffy. He's, inside his crate. Part of his body is fake, part of it is a creature costume, and it's integrated with the live performer. And we're building that right now. As a matter of fact, this is his feet, and that's his hand. Every day my phone blows up with like endless texts from my makeup team, which is a guy named Pat McGee Effects. And he's, busily working with all of these molds and sculpting, and he's just constantly sending me all of these updates, but they're huge files, and they constantly block my phone. Now, one of the people that Fluffy attacks is a guy named Charlie Garrison, and he's a student at the college, graduate student, and Fritz Weaver tells him, "Charlie, don't go in there!" But of course, like every horror movie, what do you do when somebody says, "Don't go in there"? You go in there. Charlie goes in, he can't resist because, this might make his academic career. Unfortunately, he wakes up Fluffy, and Fluffy, smacks him in the face with his claw and does this horrible gash across his face. So that's a different kind of makeup that we have to create. We create a lot of masks, but we also do a lot of what's called prosthetic makeup. And that's usually like a foam latex appliance, sometimes it's silicone, that gets glued to the actor's face every single night. And then the makeup gets blended and applied with the blood. So this is the prosthetic makeup that will be applied to the performers playing Charlie Garrison. Episode 3.
Gnarly.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but when I saw Creepshow back in 1982, and I was 15, so that means I probably snuck in. This is the episode that really freaked me out the most. Cockroaches. I can't stand cockroaches. Do you guys like cockroaches? First time I ever met my wife, she was holding a cockroach in her hand. She's like, "Look," and I'm like, "Oh, you're cool. Let's get married." This is about a story about a billionaire who lives in what's supposedly a germ-free apartment, a penthouse apartment in New York City. And he's paranoid about germs, so he's kind of modeled after Howard Hughes. But he keeps noticing that these cockroaches keep getting into his apartment, and he's getting more and more angry as he goes along, trying to understand how his germ-free apartment could have these bugs in it. And unfortunately, there's a blackout in New York City, and then all of the cockroaches start piling in through his vents and through the sink and through every single nook and cranny of his apartment until he is completely consumed with cockroaches. And you remember the last shot? I'll save it, I got a picture of it. This is actually probably one of the harder design challenges for Chris and his team. It's actually easy to do jacked up scenes, like haunted houses that are aged and look like they're falling down. That's actually easier to do scenically than to make something that looks super, super clean. This set always reminds me of Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. So that's what Chris has to, reproduce. And then my props guys have to go out and find like a vintage jukebox that looks exactly like the one in the film. This is the elevation that goes along with that. So of course our guys draw all this stuff. Some of it gets built by our scenic companies. Some of it gets built by our prop artisans. I just focused on one thing. When the blackout happens, there's like an oxygen sensor siren that goes, and I was, going through the film like I do whenever I'm working on a maze. And I'm like, what is that thing? I don't know. It's kind of cool. I'm going to put it in the treatment and see if Chris builds it or not. And so I was happy when I saw his drawing package, and I was like, geez, he actually he did a whole page just on this oxygen sensor. So it's just like trying to get all the details of the movie, trying to nail all the things that we think are important in every scene, and then try to bring them to life for you guys so that when you're walking through our maze, hopefully, if we've done our job right, you feel like you're walking through the movie. And of course this happens.
Oh my God.
So, this is quite a challenging scene to do. I know our prop guys have got like bajillions and billions of bugs that they're working on, but you want the movement too. And it's just not acceptable to release a bunch of cockroaches loose in a maze. And,
Good to hear.
it's frowned upon, so we couldn't do that. So of course what we're going to do is we're going to rely on projection as well as all of the static things that are in the scene. So you're going to go through Upson's penthouse apartment. You're going to see that all the bugs are starting to get in, and then you're going to go into his private sleeping chambers. And in the film, he gets overwhelmed with cockroaches, and then it kind of cuts to the next, presumably the next day. And the maintenance guy is finally calling to tell him, hey, I'm here to help you with your bug problem. He's not answering the phone, and then you see like one cockroach run out of his mouth, and then hundreds of them pour out of it. So we're going to do this scene, of course, because how could we not? So that's a live performer. So we've got a live performer integrated with a special effect illusion table. This is kind of like how we did the reverse bear trap for Saw. If you saw our Saw maze or one of our Saw mazes over the years, it's a slant board effect, so that part of the performer's body is concealed within the set, and we're marrying up their real body, which is usually their head, shoulders, and arms, to a fake body. And then we're adding layers of projection on top of it, so that when you come through this last scene, there's bugs crawling everywhere. And then after that, we're gonna mess with you. And I'm just gonna leave it at that. I don't really want to tell you. I'll save some things. Now, the last two stories in Creepshow are based on the new Shudder series, and I'm not going to show any spoilers because I want you guys all to experience the series and see it just like I saw it. So I'm just going to show you a couple of references of like the drawing packages and things like that, but I'm going to save all the creatures because Greg would kill me because he's created all of them, and he wants to have that impression, obviously, when you watch it for the first time. But there's two particular stories we're focusing on, both of which are from the upcoming series on Shudder. One of them is called Gray Matter. Is anybody familiar with that story? It was a short story previously. It's about a guy who drinks a beer and ingests some mutagen that causes things to change. And that's all I'll say about that. But his apartment, what we work with is we work with location photography. So we get all these pictures from the set, and then we have to bring it to life. So there's something in the apartment, but I won't tell you what that is. And then Chris takes all of those pictures that I send him, and he starts doing his drawings. So all of that moss and mold and mildew, all of that is stuff that Chris draws into the drawing packages you see here. And then that really is the job of our props and dressing people to come in and dress the set after the scenic crew is done, to make it look exactly like it looks in the television show. We're going to take you into the kitchen, and it's getting even worse, and it's even more mildewy, and there's this weird mold growing everywhere. And then this is just a close-up of one particular drawing of the kitchen. So that's another example of what our props and dressing crew have to do. And then you're going to go into the bathroom, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So if you're a germaphobe or you don't like mold, you're pretty much screwed. Sorry. And again, this is a couple of close-ups of what Chris has drawn in the drawing package with our production designers. So it just gets worse and worse and worse, and then eventually you're going to meet what is behind all of this. And I'll leave it at that. And last but not least, episode 5 is a story called Bad Wolf Down. It's a story that takes place in France. It's kind of towards around the time of Battle of the Bulge, so towards the latter part of World War II. There's an American troop that's kind of caught behind enemy lines during that battle, and they have to retreat to a French jail cell, and that's where all the action takes place. So for us, we have to create this French jail cell, and immediately they start picking up on some things that are not right inside this jail cell. They see these claw marks on the wall like you see here. The table's broken, there's dead body in there, there's, again, more of these jagged claw marks, and you start wondering, well, what's going on inside this? And of course, I give this to Chris and his team, and they draw it all up, so this is another example. Now, every one of these drawing packages is probably like 100 pages, 100 pages of drawings. We're doing more mazes than ever before this year. In total, we're doing, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but we're doing 10 mazes this year, so 10 mazes times 100 drawings per maze, that's a lot of people drawing. And where do these people come from? Well, a lot of them are production designers for movies and television shows who then come over and they kind of moonlight for us in between productions. So we've got this staple of movie production designers that always like to come back and work with us on horror nights. And every once in a while, it's cool. Like last year, we actually had a guy that we had drawing our maze, and he goes, this was my movie. I worked on this movie. So we actually production designed the movie and production designed the maze. And eventually, where we're headed is these jail cells, these very, very dark jail cells. And something bad is inside there waiting for you. You just don't know what it is. But you see blood everywhere, and you see a full moon. And then you walk inside the jail cells, and then it just goes bad. And then once you've gotten through Bad Wolf Down, we're going to treat the maze just like the movie, just like the original film. It starts with the prologue and it ends with the epilogue. So, you know, if you remember the prologue to Creepshow, it's the dad is yelling at his son, how could you read this crap? You know, why do you waste your time on these comic books? And he threatens to throw the comic book away. So when you come out of the last scene of Bad Wolf Down, you enter that alleyway, you see that the kid's comic book, his precious Creepshow comic book, has been thrown in the trash. And you hear that creep laughter that you hear, you know, in the movie, and you know the creep is somewhere. So there's, you know, one last good jolt before you exit. And that's Creepshow.
Thanks for watching.
So this is the new creep that Greg designed, and this is our sculpt in progress of the creep we're creating for the maze. I brought some other goodies along to share with you guys. Is that okay? I could just leave. All right. You know, one thing, I've done Midsummer Scream a whole bunch of times as long as there's been a convention. Chris and I have spoken at a lot of conventions. We always try to do something new or different or share an aspect of the event that we haven't shared.